Good Thursday, everybody. It's another edition of the 2-2 Podcast. Listen, I'm so glad and grateful that you are able to be with me today. Today's episode has been anticipated for a long time. I know I've said that for a few episodes, but this is one of those episodes that has been highly anticipated by me for a long time, and I don't want you to miss a minute of it. Grab your friends, grab your family, grab your co-workers, grab your notebook, your iPad, your laptop. We'll have a talk today, and I don't want you to miss a minute of it. Grab somebody, tell them to listen to the 2-2 Podcast today. See you in a minute. Have you ever wanted to record a podcast, but didn't know the way? Well, I've got good news. Let me tell you about something. It's called Anchor. And Anchor is the easiest way to record a podcast. Let me explain. It's absolutely free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So here's what I need you to do. Please download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's episode. Today I wanted to kind of extend upon the accountability episode that I did on Tuesday. For those of you who have not listened to that episode, I encourage you to listen to that episode because the parallels between today's episode and Tuesday's episode are going to be there. But for those of you who did listen to Tuesday's episode, I really, really appreciate you. Thank you for listening to that. Continue to let other people know to listen to this episode. Listen to that episode about accountability. It was very informative. It was a lot of fun to do because it allowed me to be transparent, open, and it allowed me to help others heal from the same things that I'm still in the process of healing from, and in the process of in the final stages of being free from. And accountability, just to recap, is just a big thing for me. You heard me tell the story from when I was a kid, and one of my basketball coaches at the time pulled me out of the gym to have a talk with me about accountability. And the ironic thing was I got that lesson as a kid, but I didn't really fully understand and implement it until I became an adult. And I mean, well into my adult years. Just about accountability, because I held on to what and who hurt me. I held on to it. And the accountability piece was like, what about all the times that I didn't take an opportunity? What about those times where I didn't say, you know what, some of this is my fault? And what I mean by that is I would do something and I would blame somebody else and something else that happened to me in the past. And oftentimes I would be asked, what does one have to do with the other? What does one have to do with the other? And there's a point in your life where you got to stop blaming one thing, blaming the things of your past as to why you are doing something at the moment. I mean, don't get it twisted. Don't get me wrong. There are factors. They are big factors as to why we do what we do. I mean, excuse me, there's a point in your life where you have to say, you know what, in spite of my past, in spite of the past wrongs, my past wrongdoings and the wrongdoings that have been done to me in the past, there's a point in my life where I have to say, you know what? I have to be accountable to correct the wrongs, make the corrections needed, the corrections that are needed on my end, and then to forgive and to heal. I'm accountable for that. But with that accountability, sometimes you find yourself in a place where you beat yourself up for things that you've done and things that were done to you that you think that are your fault. Today, I wanted to talk about, just for a little bit, self-forgiveness. For such a long time, I would beat myself up for everything, every little mistake. And I still have a habit of doing that now, but that's more of an athletic standpoint. I have a tendency to beat myself up in the heat of competition. And that's because I always had a problem with having a short-term memory and moving on. Saying, you know what, I'll get better. I always had a issue with self-sabotage and self-destruction. I always had a problem with just not forgiving myself. And there was a point in my life where I said, I can no longer, as one of my favorite songs says, continue to replay regrets. I no longer could keep on this path. See, sometimes the hardest person, this is what James Fortune said this at the beginning of I Forgive Me. This episode is named after one of my favorite songs, I Forgive Me. And you can say whatever, well, you could have given it a better name, something more catchy. No. Sometimes simplicity most of the time, simplicity does the job. James Fortune said this at the beginning of this song. He said, sometimes the hardest person to forgive is the one you look in the mirror at every day. It's easy, oftentimes, for some people to forgive others. It's easy to forgive others. Not really. But sometimes it's easier to forgive others than it is to forgive ourselves. Because those that you forgive, you can forgive and get away from them. Forgive and they're never back in your life. Forgive and cut ties with them. Forgive and the level of access changes. Forgive and the level of friendship changes. It's easy to forgive someone else. But I have a question. What happens when you have to deal with yourself? It's hard to forgive you because every day you have to deal with you. You can't get away from you. You can't change the level of friendship with yourself. You can't cut off ties with yourself. It's hard to forgive you because you oftentimes at the highest, at some point where you're trying to get better and heal and become a better person and do some greater things, sometimes you start replaying the tape of all the mistakes that you've ever made. You get in a relationship with somebody, you get married to somebody, and you start playing and replaying all the times that you did somebody wrong. And sometimes things fail with other people because we haven't forgiven ourselves from all the mistakes we've made. But there comes a point in time in your life where you have to say, look, I know I was wrong, but I've carried this for a long time. It's hard to forgive me because every time I look in the mirror, I wear my mistakes on my face. I wear my mistakes on my face. Yeah, I'm joyful out. Yeah, I'm joyful outdoors. Yeah, I'm joyful around people. Yeah, I encourage other people to heal. Yeah, I encourage other people to forgive. But sometimes when I get away, I'm just being transparent. I'm having a talk. I just want you to know about me and what I've been through and what I'm fighting through. That sometimes, even in the midst of me helping others, have a hard time with the advice that I give others. You can call it hypocritical if you want to. But everybody's in a battle. I'm still healing from the things that I put other people through. That sounds toxic. And what I mean by that is, I never forgave myself. Even if they did or did not forgive me forgiveness. Sometimes you have to learn how to forgive yourself when other people don't forgive you for things. But I had a hard time with that. I tried to be Superman to other people. I tried to be Superman to other people's situations. I tried to be a superhero. And I heard this, and I'm going to repeat it again. I said this last week. That sometimes we can be Superman or Superwoman to people, but we never address Clark Kent. We're superhero to people, but we never address Clark Kent. It's hard to forgive yourself when you've done wrong. It's harder to forgive. It's hard to forgive when you felt like you've done wrong, even though some things that happen to us, a majority of, I'll say, a lot of the things that happen happen based on cause and effect aren't our fault. But because we don't sometimes realize it's not our fault, we will treat it as if it is. Lord knows
that I've been in some places in my life where it's been so hard to forgive me for what other people. I couldn't forgive myself for my father not being there. I thought it was my fault. What is like? I wanted for years. I wanted to ask him, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I wanted to ask somebody that did, a friend that decided that the friendship should end. And this is before I understood the levels and language of true language of friendships. Even when it wasn't my fault, I wanted to ask, what did I do wrong? I wanted to ask relationships that broke up, relationships that I was in, when we broke up and things fell apart, I wanted to ask, what did I do wrong? Even if it wasn't my fault, what did I do wrong? For years I asked myself, what did I do wrong? For years, I tried to go, okay, what if I do this, and I do this, and I do this, and I say this, and I dress this way, and I talk this way, and I do this, and I do this. Maybe they'll look my way. Maybe they'll maybe they'll give me a second chance. Maybe they'll regret not being with me. Maybe they'll do that. See, I was trying to change who I was because I was holding on and replaying some regrets and replaying some things that weren't even my fault. They weren't my fault. And eventually, there's a point in your life. And if I get this movie wrong, please forgive me. I believe it's Good Will Hunting. Robin Williams. I think Matt Damon. I could be getting the name wrong of this movie. And I apologize. There's a part in there where Robin Williams is telling, I believe, Matt Damon. He just keeps saying it to him. It isn't your fault. And Matt Damon's like, what? It isn't your fault. Eventually, I had to tell myself it isn't your fault. For those things. Just kept having to say it. It wasn't you. It was them. But for those things that I did wrong, I finally had to say, I'm letting go. Because me continuing to hold on to these things that I've done wrong, mainly to myself, but also to other people. I'm man enough to say I've done people wrong. I wasn't always, but I'm man enough to say that I've done other people wrong. I'm man enough to say, hey, I made some mistakes. I did some dirt. Man enough to say that I've done people wrong. I'm man enough to say that I've ruined some friendships, some relationships, based on my own issues. Not everybody has the guts, the courage to say, you know what? I did wrong. And you got to take, it's not only that you have to take that step to acknowledge, step towards acknowledging that you've done wrong in the past. It's a point where you have to say, you know what, but enough is enough. I can no longer hold on to this. I can no longer allow my past to hold back my future while I'm in the present. Sometimes you have to learn how to let go. There was a picture of a person holding a rope. I don't know if it was a guy or a girl. Doesn't matter. And they're holding this rope, and it's turning their hand red. And then it's turning it blue. And it says sometimes in order to get towards the future and not hold yourself, it's letting go of the past. And eventually that person lets go of the rope and their hand turns to their normal color, their normal pigment. But sometimes we want to hold on to every past mistake that we've ever made. Yeah. Sometimes we want to hold on to every past mistake that we've ever made. Every past mistake we've ever made. But we have to learn to stop holding on to those things because they're holding us back. You have to learn to learn the value of these 3 words. I forgive me. I forgive me. Not only for what other people have done and that weren't my fault. I forgive me for even thinking that it was my fault. For even believing that it was my fault. For even believing that I needed to change and change some things about me in order to fit what they wanted. Because some people's viewpoints of view are skewed. Some people can't handle the real you because they haven't been able to handle the real them yet. They haven't even tapped into the real them, and it scares them. We're not talking about that. We're talking about making a paradigm shift and saying 3 words. I forgive me. But before you can completely get to that point, let me read these real quick. There's this list I was looking at, and it's on Pinterest. If you want to take a look at it, and I'll put it on all social media platforms later on today. It's a guide to self-forgiveness. And I should have done this earlier into this episode, but we'll just do it right now because somebody needs to hear this. And number 1, it says to make a list of everything you cannot want or need to forgive yourself for. Or cannot or want or need to forgive yourself for. Making a list. You don't always have to write it down, but think of it sometimes. What are those things that you've never forgiven yourself for? And then take it one step at a time. Choose that one thing. Don't try to tackle everything at once, because you'll overload yourself. You'll burn yourself out trying to do everything at once. That was my issue. Trying to do everything at one time. Trying to do everything at one time. Burned me out. But you have to take it brick by brick. Brick by brick. Identify those limiting beliefs and negative emotions. Man, the negative emotions and those beliefs where if I could have done this, if I would have been this way, everything would have been better. It's okay to correct mistakes. It's not okay to, self-sabotage. Sometimes we self-sabotage our own identity trying to do too much when we need to take it one step at a time. Doesn't sound like it makes sense, but think about it. Are we holding ourselves accountable to get to the point where you are you're practicing self-forgiveness, or are you just doing it? Are you still in a pattern where you haven't forgiven yourself even for the smallest things? You got to identify those limiting beliefs that you're not enough, that you're inadequate, that you are, horrible, that you have to, that you can't find freedom, and that you can't find forgiveness, and that you can't find deliverance, and that you can't find and that you can't find peace. Because the thing about self-forgiveness, the thing about saying those 3 words, I forgive me, is this. It's peace. When you forgive yourself. Another favorite song of mine is, as soon as I stop worrying how the story ends, I let go and I let God. And I let God have his way in this situation. I let go and let God. Because in spite of the fact that other people won't forgive me, I forgive me. I no longer want to be bound by my past. I no longer want to be held captive by my past. It has held me back for a long time. I no longer want to be held back and bound by my past. You have to tell yourself that on a consistent basis. Hold yourself accountable to be consistent. To have a level of consistency that says every day that I forgive me, and I will not sit back and allow myself to replay the tape of my past. I won't allow me to hurt me. I won't allow me to hold me back. I find one of my favorite scriptures. I find this law and principle to be true. Every time I try to do good, evil is always present. Every time I try to find healing, everything that I'm healing from tries to come back. Every time I try to forgive myself, my self-tale starts replaying everything I did wrong. Every time I try to get peace from this situation, my past, remind me of who I was and who I did wrong and who did me wrong and who I haven't forgiven and how many times I haven't forgiven myself. Every time I try to do good, evil is always present, and it's not always people, it's me. And until I deal with me, I'll think it's everybody else. I'm accountable for making sure that I get the necessary healing and I get the necessary peace in order to progress into what God has for me in my future. I'm responsible for myself. If they never say sorry, if they never say, forgive me for anything that I did wrong, if they never deal with me again, I have to learn the value of I forgive me. I know I've done wrong, but I can't carry this forever. It's held me back too long. And those negative thoughts and those negative emotions have held me back this long. And it's time for me to say, hey self, enough is enough. I can't stay in this place where I keep replaying my past. I can't stay in this place where I keep not forgiving myself and hoping and having a glimmer of hope that other people will forgive me. Because in this season, I had to learn the value of forgiveness. For the last few years, I had to learn the value of forgiveness. I had to learn how to forgive not other people, not just other people, but the next level was forgiving myself. It's easy to let people know, let bygones be bygones. Water under the bridge. Take it with a grain of salt. But it was harder to tell myself that. I keep saying it, but I just need somebody to understand that I know there's somebody listening right now at this very moment that is struggling, that is in pain, that is just, they're tormented by their past. And I want somebody to know that you can get free from your past. It takes a little while. It takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day. Championship teams weren't built in a day. It takes time to go from ground zero to higher levels. It takes time to build something. It takes time to build accountability. It takes time to build consistency. It takes time to inspect and do inventory and to confront those things in it takes time. Please understand, this is not a get rich quick scheme. This is not a microwave message. This is a crock pot message right here. You cannot get crock pot freedom in microwave time. You can't get crock pot anything in microwave time. It is going to take some time, patience, accountability, and consistency to get to this point. I'm not trying to sell you a dream. But I want somebody that's listening right now that's struggling with the pain of not being able to forgive themselves, that you can get free today. You just have to learn how to say those 3 words. I forgive me. It's time to adopt new paradigms and let go of the old beliefs. It's time to make new patterns. It's basically what paradigm is. You've heard people say it in church. It's time for a paradigm shift. It's time to shift your patterns. That's all it is. It's just a fancy word to say a pattern shift. It is time to adopt new patterns and let go of the old beliefs. I'm letting it go. As the song finishes, I'm letting it go because you won't hold my future anymore. I got to tell myself that every time I look in the mirror, that I won't hold my future back any longer. I'm letting it go. Today is the day. Now is the time. It's never too late to say, I forgive me. Hey, listen, thank you for joining the show today. Don't forget to follow the show page and my personal page. The show page is 22_podcast. That is 22_podcast on Instagram. And my personal page at AlexJ_live. That is AlexJ_live. Please don't forget the 22 podcast has merch. That's on 22apparel.threadless.com. That is 22apparel.threadless.com. See you soon.